and welcome to Graveside Chat. This is the very first episode of Graveside Chat, which is kind of a glimpse inside the inner sanctum of Arcane, the production studio behind the Frightmare Theater podcast. My name is Nathan Shelton. I am one of the creators of the Frightmare Theater podcast, and I continually voice Dr. Necropolis on the show, as well as other characters on the show, and have written many episodes. And joining me here, we have, just take it away, Heath.
Hi, my name is Heath Hillhouse, and I am also a writer and performer for Frightmare Theater. I wrote the episode "Knock Knock" from our first season, and also voice Al the werewolf in the Frightmare bits. I'm an aspiring horror novelist, playwright, so I'm very intrigued by all sorts of different types of horror. This podcast has been amazing, and I'm really looking forward to talking about some films with y'all.
My name is Andy McMurtry, and I help write some of the scripts and do some voice work on the show. Play the announcer in the main appearing cast, and right in our hometown of Missouri still, and that's about it, I think. So you take the ball now, Alex.
I think it's called like popcorning when you, at least
okay.
It's a new thing. I think people are being weird about popcorning. I'm Alex. I'm actually in New York right now, so I'm in a totally different time zone. I was added to the staff writer team last summer, I believe. And I've got one episode that'll be featured at down the road in our second season.
Yep, and so we've got two people coming in from Springfield, which is where the whole show started. We've got me actually coming out of Chicago and Alex in New York tonight. So four of us out of the original 9 members of the writing team for Frightmare Theater joining. And just a little quick history for everyone out there. We came together on this project, but it's not the first project that we've all worked on together. At various times, we all have a tie with Missouri State University. Some of us started when it was still Southwest Missouri State University in the theater department. Heath and I met back in 2000. Just the year 2000. In the year 2000. Met back all the way in the year 2000 in Acting 1 class. And then the next year, Andy joined. You came in 2001. Is that right, Andy? Or 2002?
2002, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so a couple of years later, Andy joined the department, and we started working together in some movies and things, and all were there. And then a little bit after that, Alex came in. And were you a grad student when you came in, Alex?
I was a grad student starting in the fall 2006.
Okay, yeah. So I think all of us, were you still there, Andy, at that time, or had you left?
I graduated in 2006.
Okay. And so we all have ties to that, and we kind of came from the theater world, all had an interest in horror. And I think all of us come to this from a variety of different places. Like Heath mentioned, he is a horror novelist, and we used to play role-playing games in college, Vampire the Masquerade, and had this game going for 9 years or something that we did that was just amazing.
Nerds!
Yes. And Andy actually loves horror so much that Andy was actually a local Southwest Missouri horror host that was quite popular in our hometown, Springfield, Missouri, Queen City of the Ozarks, as a horror host. Andy, do you want to actually talk about that? Because that's pretty interesting. You should give the listeners a little bit of knowledge about.
Yeah, I was Uncle Gregory was the character I played, Uncle Gregory Horror Hour, and we got
the
it
new
on.
Uncle Gregory.
New, yes, as opposed to the old one.
Yeah.
And it was on local TV for a couple of years. Started off as a YouTube series, and we were just glad to reach that main goal of getting it on television here.
Yeah, and Andy's love, Andy, I mean, your love for like classic horror movies and cheesy horror movies and things like that. You did all of that. You did all the editing and everything and putting that show together, and it was
Yeah, pretty
fantastic.
much what you're doing now. So
Well, it's different. It's a little different in the audio world than it is in the video world, and at least I've got all these great people helping write the show together to come up with the ideas. But yeah, when you did that show, that was very impressive, and you can go back to that area and ask anybody. Everybody knows who Uncle Gregory is, or was, I should say. God rest his soul.
yes.
But yeah, and so that voice, your voice in general, we had to get it on the show. It's a perfect voice for the announcer. So um, Andy's a co-producer on this, and we're really glad to have him on that. So and then Alex, super excited to have, we kind of rekindled because Alex had moved out to New York, and then we were part of the. I hadn't talked to you in actually a couple of years, and we were on that horror movie group on Facebook that our friend in New York was hosting every week.
Yeah.
And Alex always had the best comments, like the best things to say about the movies, the greatest one-liners and all this stuff. And I was like, man, Alex is awesome. And I forgot just how much you liked horror and stuff. And so I'm like, I wonder if I was looking for another writer, and I was like, we don't have anybody representing from New York, so I'll reach out. And luckily we were able to nab you as a writer on the show, and we're very excited to have your very first episode coming up in season 2 called Homecoming. So that'll be very exciting. Is that episode 6, right? I think.
I think so. Yeah, episode 6.
Yeah, episode 6. So we're very, very excited about season 2 coming up. But until then, we're going to keep strong every month with this Graveside chat for all you guys out there. And tonight, we're kicking it off with a top 5. We thought that would be the best way to start this thing. Is top 5. Top 5 what? We were like, oh my God, what are we going to talk about? We could talk about literally anything. But we decided, top 5 horror films. And I think we each came at this in a little bit different way, which is interesting. But we're going to go through our top 5. And I would like for us all to also kind of explain a little bit about how we came up with our top 5, because we might have different reasons. So, and that's just as important, because all this is subjective anyway. And we'll just chat movies for a little bit. So in all the movies that we talk about, guys, I will make sure that I put the links to either the IMDb or like a trailer or something in the show notes for you. So if anybody wants to get interactive with this bad boy later on, you're welcome to. But let's start it off right now with Alex. What is your first of your top 5 favorite horror films?
So I went about this like if it suddenly popped up on streaming or some channel where I hit play immediately. That's where I came from with this. So one of mine is it's called Night of the Creeps.
Yes.
I love it so much because I mean Tom Atkins alone is makes it worth it for me because yes, he's attacked with a catchphrase, like that's perfect. I love it.
Yeah, and it's that movie's amazing too. Has everybody seen Night of the Creeps?
It's been so long, but I know I have a long time
Yeah,
ago.
it's a Fred Decker film. So precursor to like Monster Squad and things. And the cool thing about that movie is that it has affected so many other movies down the line. Most notably, I would think Slither, James Gunn's Slither, is almost directly copied from half of that movie's plot with the alien slug things that are bringing people, turning them into zombies. I mean, that is right out of Night of the Creeps, but it's got that amazing 80s flair to it.
Yeah.
That movie has everything. It's got aliens, it's got like slugs, it's got zombies.
I remember when I was younger, they advertised that movie for the afternoon movie of the week or something.
Like on a horror host program?
Yeah. Well, no, it was just a random, movie during the afternoon. And I remember they showed the clip where he knocks on the door and he says, well, good news, your dates are here.
Yes.
Bad news is they're dead. And that actually didn't make me laugh. It actually frightened me. Yeah, I was a little too young.
Yeah.
And I think that I must have tuned in and watched at least the end where that happens. And that stuck in my mind, that scene where there's zombies coming into the sorority or the party.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've seen it too.
I mean, it's kind of campy, right? But it's made to be that way. It's made to be kind of a retro, almost throwback to 50s movies, kind of a lifting up of that genre with the mixture of sci-fi and horror. But it's pretty gruesome. I mean, you have people's heads splitting open and those
Hmm.
little sluggy things coming out, and but all practical effects, amazing
Hmm.
practical effects. And the aliens look really weird at the beginning. They're like little, they have big butts and like, you know, like they're just like these weird little round. I don't know. They're really weird looking. I have a shirt, actually, a T-shirt that is a conglomeration of Monster Squad and Night of the Creeps, and it says "bogus" on the back of it. It was one of those. They don't make them anymore. It was one of those like pop-ups on Fright Rags or something. But yeah, that's a good first pick, Alex. Well played, sir. Next, Andy, you're up. What's your top? For your
Well,
first of your top
I
five.
guess I would have to preface it with what I just used for my criteria to choose,
Mm-hmm.
which was I took it from more of a objective point of view where I had to kind of mainly divorce myself from my own personal preferences of what I enjoy watching
So to
for
be
just for the
clear,
love of it.
are you saying you're thinking that these are like what might be widely considered the top
Yeah,
five?
and it's going to be very generic because it's probably going to be ones that are on everybody's list.
I don't
But
know.
I think that,
I don't think we all did that. So that's a good. That's a
well, that's just what I mean. They're going to be recognizable titles.
gotcha. Gotcha.
Sure.
But I did, in a little bit, I did list like my alternates.
Okay.
And then I also
Honorable
listed,
mentions.
yes, I listed some that I
I
felt
have
were
some too.
overrated
Oh,
horror
okay.
movies. So maybe
Interesting.
if we get to it, I can tell you what
I
those
would.
are.
I'm very interested in the overrated qualification.
But one of the criteria that I had to use is what is horror. And there was where we had a discussion a while back at our cabin retreat. We were trying to
Mhm.
define that, and I can't remember what the discussion led to. But in my opinion, there has to be something where it has to be clearly defined what is the horror, and it doesn't have an offshoot subgenre like science fiction horror, as Night of the Creeps could be considered that because it
And
has
horror
science
comedy.
fiction and
Yes.
it's horror comedy.
Hmm.
So I'm looking at it,
Okay.
or attempting to, as pure horror.
Okay.
And two of the titles, or actually I'll just be able to list one that I consider a good movie, is one that I can't in a way define as horror because it includes a science fiction element to it, and that would be Alien. And a lot of people say, well, it's a haunted house movie. It's has science fiction elements, but it's essentially a
I
monster
I think
running around in the
most
house.
people
And I think
consider
that,
that a horror movie in
yeah,
space. Yeah.
but if it were me, I don't know if I could um, include that on a
Because you're a purist.
legit. Yeah, I'm a purist, I suppose.
You're a
But
Puritan.
I'll let it slide this time because I think that it's just uh, so
Well,
well.
I agree with
It's
you
a good
though.
one.
It is a great one, and it is a horror movie. It is. I mean, yes, it happens to be set in space, so you have an alien entity, but it's a monster movie, and it is. You know, it is a thing that goes bump in the night. You don't see as much. It has the old style classic kind of scare to it. You know, where it's not about necessarily seeing all the gruesome kills. It's so it's not slasher, but it's about the building of the suspense and the
The
tension. And that movie's
anticipation,
pretty,
the
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah,
and it's pretty bleak from the get go. I
yeah,
mean,
and I
Yeah.
think that that's one of the criteria I also used is that I feel like throughout the entire movie, it has to pretty much have a sense of dread
yeah,
throughout,
I
and
agree that that's like pure horror to me.
and that would be what I would consider the best horror movie because it's through the entire length of the movie, uh, continuing with that emotion,
I totally, I would totally agree
and
with
that one
that.
does, I think.
Yeah, good pick, good pick. Heath, you're up. What's your first in your top
Uh,
five?
well, I'll go through what I've actually. Andy Alien's one of my three honorable mentions. So, um, but I went actually. Andy went objective. I went subjective,
Hmm.
and I said, what are the films that cause from my memory from watching them? It's not necessarily stuff that some of them that I don't even want to watch it again, or I can only watch like very, very so often, the things that cause that sense of dread that in me in viewing it. So this is, I guess, a very personal kind of list. So it's very much not these are the best horror films of all time. These are the things that I consider to be my most horrific memories, experiences, or the things that cause me the most horror in watching them.
Absolutely.
And I went like 5-1. So like my number 5 is A Nightmare on Elm Street. And this is a film that it may, perhaps that's tied into how old I was when I first saw it, which was very young. But there are just some terrifying moments that are tied into that would also, at that conversation that we had at our retreat. I don't know if I mentioned it there, but around that conversation, I was talking about how A Nightmare on Elm Street and also the Friday the 13th, like those franchises really kind of established for me that generic concept blueprint for this is like slasher horror, or this is some sort of supernatural horror, or it was the thing that was like the building block that I used going forward when I saw them when I was much younger. And between A Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th, I mean, Freddy Krueger is the much more terrifying entity in my mind. And that film, that first film in particular, I thought really caught a sense of just that dread going forward throughout the constant worry and the constant fear that you have that if you fall asleep, the thing that you cannot help but do,
Right.
you will succumb to this. And and at the same time, it also features an antagonist that they show from his point of view, and that's always interesting to me too. But also it like it heightens that horror that, well, he's doing these terrible things, he kind of has a reason that he wants to do it. Well, he's a terrible person though, he's a child molester in the end, but even just that little hint of is there maybe some justification for any of this horror that is happening right now makes it all the more terrifying to me.
Yeah, well, and that first movie, like you're saying specifically, I think has more of the that level of dread and like, oh my God, I can't not fall asleep. It is inevitable
Mm-hmm.
that he will get me because I know he's waiting, and as soon as I fall asleep, this demon that can get me at any time will get me. But then those movies very quickly devolved into gimmicky, and I'm not saying they're bad because they're fun, like
Sure.
goofy ass movies like that are fun to watch. But even that first one too, it's got catchy, cheesy kind of one-liners, and it is about the kills. Like, how gruesome are these kills? A kid getting sucked into the
Mm-hmm.
bed and the blood got
Mm-hmm.
shooting up, and all that kind of stuff. And it is about the special effects. It is about um the fantastical horror elements, which is another aspect of horror that I think is very interesting and appeals definitely, depending on when you saw that movie. I completely agree with you. And that movie is not on my list because I did not see it when I was a kid. My parents would not let me see the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, even though they let me see
Mm-hmm.
some other crazy shit. They never let me see that. So I didn't grow up with Freddy Krueger. I grew up around it. Chucky, Freddy Krueger, any of the real slashers except for Halloween. I saw the Halloween movies because my dad was a huge fan of the first Halloween. So I grew up with that. Loved it. It's not on my list, but remarkably, it's one of my alternates because I love that movie. But I grew up so much, and you can't deny Freddy Krueger's impact on the genre and on a whole generation of people. You can't deny it. There's a reason that those movies are so popular, and I think it inevitably was because it's because that first movie did have that sense of dread and did come from a place of you know just a great horror premise. It's I think he's out of all the slasher like kind of characters that are out there. Freddy Krueger is still one of the best, and portrayed so beautifully by Robert Englund too. Just
When I was a kid, Freddy Krueger, along with the Wolfman, for some reason, were the two that scared me the most. And I'd never seen any of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, but
but it
he was
still
kind of
scared you.
he was kind of
Still
ubiquitous during
scary.
that time. So
Sure.
Right,
I think
everywhere,
that I
everywhere.
probably saw a commercial on TV,
He was in
or
Pizza
more.
Hut commercials, I think.
Oh, really? More
Yeah,
like,
around
yeah, because his face looked like pizza.
Yeah. I don't think that's why.
Probably when I would go to the video store and they would have those cardboard stand-ups, and he would be
Right.
standing there full bodied, and that would be pretty frightening. Strangely enough, I watched a Kolchak episode. I found the whole series on DVD at the thrift store.
Oh,
Oh,
You know, they're getting it
wow.
for $5, so I bought it.
You lucked out because that's like
I'd never
Hell
watched
yeah.
like 20
all of
bucks
them,
online.
but the episode I watched was one about a ghost arsonist who possesses a composer's body. And what this ghost does is that he sets people on fire during their dreams. When they fall asleep, he sets them on fire, and Kolchak is on this guy's hit list, and Kolchak can't go to sleep either, because that's when this ghost will possess this composer's body.
Wow.
And isn't that a strange coincidence?
Holy
You would
shit.
have to think that that Wes Craven would have had to have seen that, because that's too
Episode written
specific.
by Wes Craven, but it was.
I mean,
You would think,
it-
but I know that he's always said that his whole reason for that is because he read some story. Uh, it was in another country, I think, but there was some story about kids that were terrified that they were going to die in their sleep or something, and then they did, or
Mm.
something like that. He's often said what the story that inspired him to write that would be, or was, that he thought how terrifying it would be to do this. But yeah, that's pretty crazy. I had no
Yeah.
idea. I've never seen that episode.
But
I've seen a lot of
I
episodes
mean,
of that show.
Anne Rice has said the same thing about Dark Shadows, because there was a storyline where there was a character that was a novelist, and he was interviewing Barnabas Collins to get a big seller by interviewing a vampire.
Mhm.
Really?
And that would have had to have been during a time when she probably was, it was early 70s, when she was
Right.
probably outlining the story for Interview with the Vampire. But
Yeah.
who knows? I don't know. But it's
Yeah,
quite a
that's crazy.
coincidence.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, horror
Well-
as a genre, it feels like is one that does a very good job at lending ideas. It's
Absolutely.
and one can say that that sometimes they might be more stolen than borrowed, but at the same time, there are so many concepts that are shared.
Yeah.
And like
And that's
the instance
fine,
of that episode,
you know.
Check the Night Stalker. Yeah.
Right.
And then who's to say that the writer of that episode did not also hear that same story that Wes Craven had heard, that
Absolutely.
origin
Because nobody references, that Kolchak episode
No.
with the arsonist ghost.
Right.
Uh,
No. But that kind of ties into my first one that I picked, because I have so many favorites and it's across so many different genres and subgenres of horror, that when we're talking like about favorite horror, I kind of wanted to look at it like, okay, I'm going to pick what I feel is representative to me of one of the most like the epitome of this, like a horror comedy or this. And one of my favorite modern horror movies, because it is so unique, because I think it takes tropes from other horror movies but spins it in some weird unique way, is Insidious. And I don't know if you guys have seen Insidious, but I saw it. I think my brother and I went back and saw it 3 or 4 times in the theater because I loved it so much, because it didn't rely on crazy special effects. It had a very interesting metaphysical horror story that you don't get, and yet it was like a haunted house story, but it wasn't. It was more about a haunted boy, kind of. And it was this weird, metaphysical principle of going out into the ether and leaving your body and going into the netherworld, which they shot all practically with fog and lighting and makeup. And it was so interesting because it used these old school techniques and didn't rely on a lot of computer generated bullshit. And I'm a practical effects hound. I love movies that utilize practical effects in a great way. And the acting is superb. You've got Patrick Wilson, you've got Lynn Shay, also from Nightmare on Elm Street, as the teacher. And yeah. And so, have you seen Insidious yet, Heath?
I have not. No.
I haven't either.
I
guys.
have. Yeah.
you got to see it because I
I
mean,
loved
yes,
it.
it has spawned 2 other movies, and they progressively get worse, in my opinion, or 3 other movies, I think, because I think there's an
That's
Insidious
usually how
4,
it
right?
goes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know. The third one was awful, I thought, but the second one is good. It's just not as good as the first one, but the first one is tight. It's unique. It's tight, and it kept me spinning. And there are genuinely disturbing things that happen and creepy jump scares, but it doesn't rely on jump scares. It's not
Mhm.
like even the Conjuring movies, the other movies that those people have made, the Conjuring movies and stuff like that, where the Annabelle, where they all really rely on those jump scares. It's all about getting to the jump scares. And in this movie, yes, there are a few jump scares, but it's really that feeling of dread and that you don't know what is going to happen and why it's happening. And it's really creepy and incredibly well shot with very interesting characters, including side characters like some of the sequels actually go into the side characters from the first movie because they're so interesting. The ghost hunting team, basically,
Mhm.
you get a backstory into them because they're just so fun to watch and be with. It has a good balance of humor to let the tension up, but it is very much a stark horror movie. And it is one of the few, in my opinion, that I would consider to be a metaphysical horror movie. So, out of my modern horror movies, it's one of my absolute favorites. And I love a lot of them, but that is one of my absolute favorites is Insidious. So, if you have, guys, I highly recommend watching that. If you ever want to do a movie
Well,
night,
we'll get together and watch that sometime.
absolutely. I'm always down to watch it. Jeremy and I went back together. I brought him to see it after I saw it. We both loved it, and then we both just went back when it was at the Dollar, or not the Dollar. What was the Palace? Like 350
But
when it was before it closed.
tree hitting.
Whatever the
Not for
Palace
350.
became before it closed. We went back there and just watched it a whole bunch of times when it was super cheap because it's so great on the big screen. It's just
But
so
you
good.
said the same thing that you went twice to see that movie that you showed us about the family that moves into the house and
No, I
he
did not.
finds the Super 8 film.
I did not see that. I did not see that in the movie theater twice. My brother showed it to me, and
Okay,
I thought it was good.
Yeah, it
you
was
liked it.
I did like
it
it.
was
I
think
it
did
was
like
Heath,
hard
it.
for me
Heath
not
and
to
I
make
were
my
a
whole
little.
list Sinister 5 times. It was hard.
Did you hate that movie?
I don't know if I hated it, but it
Sinister
wasn't.
I don't
is.
know if I hated it.
Oh, yeah,
I liked Sinister. I think it's a fun. It's not a fun movie. It's pretty bleak, but I
yeah.
think it's a
That
good
might have been
movie.
part of.
It's a pretty bleak movie, and it's definitely not one you want to watch because it's slower. It's not one you want to watch at like what did we watch that 3 in the morning or something like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's not one to do that because it's dark. It's dark the
it
whole time.
is.
It's dark in tone. It's dark in
It is
like
dark.
it's
Yeah,
almost all shot it at night in a room watching a video. It's very dark. But no, I still think it's got some really disturbing, cool
it
ideas in
does.
it.
Yeah,
But no, that
Oh,
didn't make my
there were parts
list.
of it.
100%. But
That
Yeah,
it's
is not on my list, and no, it is definitely not
but
one of my top horror
but
movies.
that's what I.
I did
When you
not.
said Insidious, I thought that's what you were
Oh no,
you
no, no,
meant.
no,
I couldn't remember
no,
the
not
title
no.
of it.
Very different movie. That's
no,
Sinister.
that's not sinister enough.
That's
Yeah,
Insidious.
Insidious
It's
is
more insidious.
James Wan movie, and it's the one that really put him on the map, that made him like the horror guru. Because Insidious, like and I didn't put this on my list too, but it's Paranormal Activity. I really enjoyed the first Paranormal Activity movie, and seeing that in the theater was an
Mm.
amazing experience. I took my whole cast of uh, uh, we were doing Evil Dead the musical at the time, and we all went on opening night after the show to go see it. And it was a packed theater, and what a great fun movie to go see on opening night at a movie theater.
I bet.
Grown men,
Oh,
like
sure.
big jocks, were squealing like little girls. It was hilarious, hilarious, and I mean, it was just so much fun because it's a general feeling of dread, but it has good shock value. Believe it or not, it is not on my list, but found footage, that and the Blair Witch Project. And if anybody bashes the Blair Witch Project, I'm gonna be upset because I love the Blair Witch Project, the original Blair Witch Project. Again, not on my list because
But
it's
that
very hard.
sequel, though,
It's
ugh.
oh god,
Book of
Book of
Shadows.
Shadows,
Ooh, no.
Book of bullshit. That movie sucked ass. What a
I went
horrible
and
movie.
saw the third one just because I was in the mood to see a movie, and
It's
I
bad.
didn't really care for the Blair Witch. I had it spoiled for me, so I can't say that I was in that right mindset for the right time to see it. But
Did you see it in the
I
theater, by the way?
no, that's
It's a
why. That's one
different
of the reasons.
experience. Yeah,
It's
I
I
gotta say, it's
watched
way too
hard
I
to
big of
watch
a
watched the
this
Blair
mistake,
theater.
Witch
I think.
Project during the afternoon on videotape with two of my friends while my dad was
Having
cooking in the kitchen, and interruptions. It was like the worst.
That is the worst way to watch that movie.
I was already aware that it was a fake movie because
that's okay. You could still get into it.
There was, and for some reason, my friends went and saw it without me, so I was left out in the dark.
Your friends,
my friends,
your
somewhat,
quote friends.
But I had already been aware that there was like this sci-fi promo that was a documentary about the movie.
Yes, yeah.
And I watched that, and I
have the book too.
And I thought, well, this is interesting. But then, as it kept going, I could tell, I think this is fake. There's something about it, and so I then realized, yeah, this is a fake movie. But I think that a lot of people that hadn't seen that really did. Like some of my friends actually thought that it was a real.
Right. Well, I knew I had been following its marketing campaign because it was the very first movie that really utilized like the viral marketing campaign. And I had been following its marketing campaign for a year. And so, and I knew it was fake, but I was so impressed with what they were doing and how they were doing it that when I went to see the movie, I was 1000% in. I was sitting there at, didn't have any popcorn or soda, which is like a go-to with me. And I was just like staring at the screen. I didn't let anybody in the theater mess with me or get me out of it. I was paying attention to every little nuance of that movie, and it scared the living shit out of me. And the third time I saw it in the theater, I couldn't stand up afterwards. After that last part, I was like, people were getting up and I was like, oh God, I was just so still into it. And I already had seen it twice in the theater. That was the first movie I'd seen 3 times in the theater. But I loved
weren't
it.
you working at the movie theater at that time?
No, that was right before. That was that was right before because that was 2000 when it came out, like 99, 2000, and when it came to Campbell 16 there in Springfield. But yeah, the next year I started working there. But I loved that movie. And again, it's not on my list, but I loved it. All right, let's keep moving on with our our top 5 for the night. So Alex, we're back with you with your next in the line of top 5 horror movies.
Okay, Creepshow, Always and Forever.
Yeah,
I will. Like
what my lighting setup is.
I always. It's the Crate's always my favorite one of those.
Absolutely.
Because it always makes me wonder, like, will someone ever do a follow-up where we see that creature from the Crate again, so we know it lives?
Well, what's your second favorite in that anthology?
Oh, definitely Father's Day. Father's Day. Yes. Absolutely.
Father's Day's good. Father's Day's good. It's a toss-up for me because I also really love what is the Leslie Nielsen one and Ted Danson?
Something to tide you over.
Yes. Something to tide you over.
Yeah.
Love that one.
That's
and I love the Jordy Verrill one too. In fact, the only one that I'm really not too fond of is the cockroach one. That's the only one that I'm just kind of like, it's okay. But all the others
No, the Jordy Verrill. That's mine.
Yeah, that's so good. But the Crate is my
Stephen
absolute
King
favorite.
Is so terribly.
He is
terrible.
He is, but it's so good.
Just tell it to call you.
No. Yeah. You've done it now.
That's the most depressing one of the stories, isn't it?
Yes,
really.
It's called The
100%.
Lonely Death of Jordy Verrill.
The Lonely Death of.
I mean, he didn't do anything wrong.
Well,
I guess he was
found some
stupid.
space shit.
He touched it, got that space shit all over me.
And his dad warned him, "Don't go in the water, don't." And he did anyway.
You nunkhead.
So good. Watch it.
Oh God,
Very nice,
I can
Alex.
watch Creepshow. I can watch Creepshow over and over. It's one of the. I have to watch it every Halloween. It is a must because it's little short vignettes too, and nobody has even come close in a horror anthology, in my opinion. Nobody's come close. Well, because that horror anthology too is very centered around the old EC comics. So it is very much like Tales from the Crypt. And I would say the only thing that even remotely comes close to it was the Tales from the Crypt TV show. But that even wildly different episodes. Some episodes were so good, especially early on. And then it was just like, how much boobs and blood can we get in this thing? Which, boobs and blood and horror, they go, well, hand in hand, so to speak, but it's great. And you enjoy it, but then it's also kind of like, come on, it's just the Tales from the Crypt got away from itself, especially in the later seasons. But Creepshow 2 was awful. Creepshow 3 was even worse. I think there's even a Creepshow 4. The Creepshow TV show, season 1, I was really not happy with. I mean, everybody loves it, but I think everybody loves it because they wanted to like it so much. And I think that they had great ideas, but I think a lack of budget and a timetable to make it really hurt that show. But I'm really looking forward to season two because I know some things that they're doing for season two. I know some people who have worked on season two, and I think that are they're putting a little bit more money in it. I did like their holiday special that they put out. If anybody watched that, the Creep Show, the
I
okay,
haven't actually.
they put out a funny holiday one, and I thought it was better. I just thought that the Creep Show TV show was kind of all over the place. There were some episodes that were pretty good, none of them that were great, and none of them that have ever touched that movie. I mean, that movie was made in 1982, three, right?
82, I think.
82, the year I was born, and it still holds up. It still holds up today as being just an amazing horror anthology, and that's very much kind of what we what our show is based on too. Like we love when we were talking about this, it was kind of like setting it up like Creep Show. You know, you've got a variety of different episodes. Some of them are a little bit more dark than others, but we have fun with it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Let's
I love
you
it.
lean in you when you lean into the pulpy campiness like EC Comics generally, that
Absolutely.
pulpiness, it makes then when you have a truly terrifying or poignant moment pop that much more. And
Right.
also now looking back years and years later, you say, well, they leaned into the campiness. It works.
Yes.
So it is
I
that
absolutely
first Creep
loved it.
Show was
It
very good.
it really it should have been on my list, honestly. It's not on my list, but it should have been on my list because that since I was quite young, that has had such a dramatic effect on me. The music in that, I have the album downstairs on vinyl. I love it. I listen to it all the time. The music, everything. The way they use the weird lighting in it to make it like a comic book, like when people freak out and you've got this kind of style, like it's amazing. And it was full of like really well respected actors. Hal Holbrook, I mean, all these actors that are in it are outstanding actors, and they're just having a lot of fun with it.
I think that's part of it too for me is if you're familiar with those actors from that time, it's part of the fun of it is seeing
Right,
them perform in something so over the top and
right.
unlike
I mean,
anything that they've done
yeah,
before, possibly.
Ted Danson
Um,
at the time too was a pretty serious actor. Like a dramatic.
Leslie Nielsen as well,
Yeah.
right?
Right at that time, yeah, he hadn't done the Naked Gun movies. He was a very serious actor at that time.
yeah.
So yeah, I agree. I think that is one of the great things about it. And then you have Stephen King in there.
Well, and not just like for me, not only does the vignettes, but like I just love that storyline with the boy and the dad at the top and at the end.
The connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I like that too. The
Bookend,
wraparound.
yeah.
And that's Joe Hill.
Mhm.
That's Stephen King's son. The
Oh,
writer
I
of
didn't know that.
yeah, that's Joe Hill, the writer of
Really?
Heart Shaped Box and Nosferatu and
Nosferatu.
yeah, Horns. Yeah, amazing writer. Too bad that his all the TV versions of his and movie versions of his stuff doesn't live up to his books, but the King has that issue too. So well, good second pick there, Alex. Well played, Andy. You're up.
My next one is Rosemary's Baby. And a lot of people wouldn't think, they think, well, it's kind of boring and you don't even see the devil baby at the end. But like I was saying, if you have a through line of dread and just feeling for the characters, and there is some dark humor in it, but it's not creep show level where it's cartoonish, and that comes from the neighbors. And of course, that's what makes them it's so much more unbearable to take because you like those people, somewhat.
Right.
They become a little overbearing,
Yeah,
but
but they're
they're
characters. You're kind of like,
right.
oh, they're kind of fun. You want to find
And I
out.
think also because they were the older neighbors, and you
Yeah.
typically think that they're kind of harmless and they're just kind of busybodies trying to be like the typical Jewish mother. Are you eating too much? But when you find out that they actually are the instigators of this diabolical plot to impregnate this woman with the devil's child, and then that her husband is in on it
Right.
too
That they were
in the
able to
end.
get him and that he's
And
so selfish that he, bought into their stuff because he wants to further his acting career.
yeah, and he
And the
says that it's for
doctor,
us, and
right.
I think she spits in his face or slaps
Yeah.
him. I can't remember, but you,
Everybody's in on it. Like, you literally do not know who to trust. And then when you finally are like, okay, no, we can trust this one guy, her friend, who
yeah,
then dies, and you're
yeah,
like, oh my God, she has
and
no one. It's
and
very, very like,
yeah, and she's just trying to, and I think that they did a good job of making it believable that she is trapped because it could have fallen into, well, why doesn't she do this or why doesn't she do that? She's stupid, but I think that she reaches
no,
out to the doctor finally,
right.
that she
The
had
other
intended
doctor.
on going, and yeah, and you think, okay, finally he's gonna, and he turns on her unknowingly. I mean,
Right.
he's doing what he thinks is best, but
Because those people are so rooted in culture that nobody believes her. So
right.
they like she's like, he turns her into her doctor because he thinks she's hysterical. She's having a hysterical woman fit, you
And I
know.
think that it's believable because it does seem like she would. I mean, if someone like that came in, then I think that a lot of people would do that.
It's all gaslighting, and it's terrifying because it puts you in her place as the
Yeah.
audience. We're very
And
much in not knowing what's really going on the whole
and
time.
so
It's truly horrifying.
it is
Yeah.
very a nightmarish movie. And I think that again, the like in Alien, and I think that I noticed something in a lot of the movies that I chose is that the acting is very good among all of the actors.
Well, that that is
It's very
Cassavetes, right?
believable, and that's why you're able to buy in to such unbelievable scenarios. Like in Alien, the rapport that the crew has with one another is one of the
Right.
main things that I and a lot of people remember, is
Right.
that it's so natural and
Well, and it means something when
improvisational.
they die. It means
Right,
something because you can buy
Exactly.
right.
that it
It's not
means
like
something
the
personal to them. It's not like, oh, that person's a throwaway.
Oh, the blonde
No,
is
okay,
dead.
we got to keep
Now the
going.
brunette is
Yeah,
dead. Yeah.
and
right.
It's
and I
It's
like
Jim is dead.
I like the Friday the 13th and Halloween movies too, but
right.
they're more like the popcorn, let's get together with some friends and have a
Yeah,
good time Halloween movies.
For sure.
absolutely.
But these are more
True horror. Yeah,
true horror
I
movies,
completely agree
and
with you.
I think that still Mia Farrow is very
Mm,
underappreciated in that movie with what she has to do because
I
she's
agree.
basically in every scene, and
And
you follow her through the entire. Uh,
you can't look at that movie without looking at Roman Polanski. And I know that Polanski's an asshole. Polanski's a monster. He personally is not a good person, and he's done some really terrible things. But he's a very talented director, and you can't deny that his art is amazing. And that movie, that is my favorite Roman Polanski film. And that's saying something because he's got a wide breadth of movies that are all fantastic and beautifully done. But that movie to me, it I think it's perfection. I don't think they could have done anything different with that movie than what he did. The cinematography, the way they shoot the dream sequences, the way they shoot her perspective and the paranoia that she's going through, the sound, like when she really starts to find out and you hear that wah wah music, it's so
I'm getting
scary.
anxiety like thinking about it. Like for
Right,
real.
it's so scary, and it's just like spiraling, and the camera's just following her face and she's you're right, her performance is just amazing, and you can see it eating away at her in the movie. Part of it's makeup, part of it, I think she actually did lose some weight in that movie, but I mean, she
and
withers away.
her in general, her demeanor and her acting in a lot of movies is she's very waifish. She's very vulnerable. You
Right.
want to come to her aid and help
Yeah.
her. I think that's one of the reasons why Frank Sinatra married her, is that he wanted
Maybe.
to take care
Maybe.
of her like a child in a way.
Sure.
But I think that she
And
was
divorced her in that
well
movie
cast in
while
that.
she was shooting that.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, I think she was well cast too. I think that
and
Uh-huh.
and if it were just a thrill, if it didn't have the supernatural element, I don't know if I would be able to consider it a horror movie. But since it has the occult and satanic parts of it,
yeah.
it can be considered part of the that genre.
And just to throw this back in there too, Andy, your story from season one that you wrote, which I love, library donation, I think really has echoes of Rosemary's Baby to it. A lot of it, and even the main guy's name is Guy in it, Guy Sunderman. and Guy
Oh
is
yeah,
her
I
husband's
didn't even
name. And
realize it.
I
I
know,
just
and
called him
you've
Guy because I couldn't think of another
I know,
name.
and you
But
told me
this
that, but I'm
that's
sitting there
the
going,
guy.
it's one of those things like we're talking about. There's certain things that resonate with you, and that story having like you don't know who's in on it, but everybody, even the diner waitress, is in on it, who played amazingly by Heath's wife Sarah, and that that episode is so great, and I think captures a lot of that same kind of paranoia and. But then, of course, it has the fun little twist. You have the funny versions of it, so it's more of like the Frightmare esque version of Rosemary's Baby. But
Yeah, it's supposed to be a little more humorous.
and obviously, and
And,
It's a
it
goat,
does
isn't
have
it?
that, but it's still I think has great echoes of Rosemary's Baby, and I liked that. Editing that one was a lot of
Sure.
fun. Okay, let's move on. Heath, what's your next in the lineup?
It's so funny. You mentioned my wife Sarah. She also gave me her top five, and Rosemary's Baby is her number three.
Hmm.
Um, but my next one is the number four, and it kind of veers away from that concept you were just talking about, Andy, with that it does have some sort of element of the sci-fi or supernatural or some sort of element to it. This one does not have any of that, but I still consider it a horror. And Nathan, just a little while ago, you were talking about the curse of Stephen King adaptations.
Yeah.
And I put this on my list because I personally feel like this is the only film that has been made of a Stephen King novel, of which I am a gigantic fan and a very big purist. But I think it's the only one that transferred the horror he created in the novel into the film, and that is the film Misery.
Okay, yeah.
And again, going
Andy
by
would not consider that a horror movie, though. Andy
exactly,
would
and that's
consider
what I'm
that a
I
saying
suspense
is
couldn't.
that
thriller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, and
But
you would
other
consider
people,
it a
it is still
thriller. I
listed.
know,
It is still listed in the horror genre
And
as
I
far as
understand. Yeah.
mainstream, not purists, but
and
mainstream. I worked at Blockbuster. Guess what section it was in? Horror. So that's well within the guidelines there, Heath.
and
I
it
thought you were
just
going to say the
and
mist,
but it
but
So we're going by blockbuster head guidelines then. Is that what we
exactly.
should be
yeah,
adhering
blockbuster
to? Okay.
guidelines.
Yeah. And
I worked
stand
there
up is with
too. I
comedy
know all that
also.
stuff.
So-
Um,
yeah, that's
but
right. You did work
it
there too.
also speaks to something you. It also speaks to something you were talking about, Andy. That it's the performances that really I think drive. It's the the on a dime just uh, personality shifts that Kathy Bates creates with that character that cause such unease, not just with James Caan but the audience, and his just the dread constantly once he gets into that house and gets into that bed. It just does not go away. And I would be up for a spirited argument about whether it is a thriller or a horror. I personally consider it a horror because, again, going down my list, this was me personally, like my experience watching
Right.
this movie. I filled with dread and horror, and some of the sequences, one in
And there's
particular,
horrific. Yeah,
I'm
there's
sure we're all
horrific
familiar
things.
with. It's
Yeah.
horrific. It's
Yeah.
it's
and
terrifying.
that's like where it gets
And
subjective because Heath, you're right. Like horror
mhm,
it's defined differently for different people, and this is a great group that we have here. The four of us actually have differing we, as much as we all love a lot of the same things, we have different ideas of how we personally classify it, and none of us so far, I wonder if we're going to have any crossovers on our lists, because right now we don't so
Oh,
far.
we will.
I'm sure
nobody
we
said any
will.
of mine. Nobody said any of mine.
I'm sure we will, but I'm kind of thinking that maybe because of the way that we all organized our lists, which are also different. All we said was we were going to go and pick out our
Mhm,
top five, and we left it very ambiguous as to
mhm.
what that means. So we've all come at this from different angles, and I like it. So Heath, it is valid, and I have a little bit of a stretch when what I consider to be horror. I think Misery, I'm on the fence about too. Like I'm not like Andy, where I'm like, nope, not horror. Mm-mm, mm-mm. But I do still think I could see it as a horror movie. Like I would generally classify it as that, but if I was being like, actually, I would say it's probably a suspense thriller. Like Silence of the Lambs, I would say is a suspense thriller. But a lot of people
Sure.
consider, and it won.
Consider it a
They used to
horror.
have those
Yeah.
horror movie awards, the Chainsaw Awards or whatever.
Hmm.
No, what was it called? The horror. They used to have them. I don't know. Hannibal Lecter. Do you remember what I'm talking about? In the '90s, they had this award ceremony. The Crypt Keeper hosted one year. The world, it was like
Oh, I
the
do
big deal.
know
They
what you're
did them for
talking
like
about.
5 years
Yes.
and then they stopped doing it. And they had all the
Yeah,
big names in
I
horror. It was a huge deal and they stopped doing it. I was reading up on it the other day because you can still watch
what's
them
it
on
airing
YouTube.
on?
I don't remember, Fox, I think. I think it was Fox.
Fox? Yeah.
Yeah, and they in between they would have special effects gags from like famous special effects artists doing things like this is
Oh,
how you
nice.
make this, and it was really
Hmm.
fun. Anyway, some people don't consider Silence of the Lambs a horror, and some people do. I think it's a suspense thriller. If you're looking at it in the sense of, this could happen or couldn't happen, anything with a killer that is not a supernatural killer like Jason Voorhees would be considered a suspense thriller. Anything that is like a slasher
Well,
like that would be with a supernatural esque element would be horror.
and like thinking about my list, like Nightmare on Elm Street was my number 5, and that was kind of like the representative placeholder for that sort of slasher, like Halloween, Friday the 13th, that sort of
Mhm.
genre. And I was putting this list together and realized I hadn't put a Stephen King adaptation anywhere on this.
Yeah.
And then I stopped and thought about which ones I would really are the best horror for me, and just all of them just I don't like because they're not good adaptations.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so I kind of ended up with like Misery is sort of my placeholder. I guess if we wanted to be purist about it, I could probably switch out The Shining, but I would feel so bad about it because it's
I wouldn't
just
call
not
it a Stephen King
the
adaptation,
story he
first
told.
of all. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
The accent.
but so
Okay, moving on, just because we got to keep the conversation going. But yes, Heath, well played, Misery. Teeter, it's coming from a different point of view, but definitely
it's
can
my
be considered a
list.
horror for sure. Um, okay, so my next one is a horror comedy, um, but it's also one that I picked from my childhood. So this to me represents the 80s and represents something that I think affected me personally on such a profound level because of the age I was when it came out that um, it earns a place in my top 5 horror films, my personal, and that's Monster Squad. And so it's another Fred Decker piece, and you can argue that it's not horror, but it's a great throwback. It brings in all of I grew up on the Universal horror films, all of them, right? My dad showed me all those and I loved them. I loved all the black and white horror movies. And there has yet to be anything made, and I'm calling out that atrocious Van Helsing movie here. There has yet to be anything made that can actually successfully bring in the Wolfman, Frankenstein's monster, the creature from the Black Lagoon, Dracula, and the Mummy together in one movie and have such an amazing cohesive plot and have it be so much fun. And Monster Squad was able to do that. And I don't know how they did it. It shouldn't have been as good as it was, but obviously it is good. It has a whole generation of people that quote it and love it, get tattoos of it on their body. Wolfman's got nards. There's a whole documentary about it. I love that movie. It had a profound effect on me because I was the age of those kids, a little younger, but like around the age of those kids when that movie came out, and I was like, hell yeah, I want to fight monsters. I want to and I had a monster club just like that in a treehouse. Just like that movie. My brother and I had a monster club and we knew everything there was about monsters. When I was in 3rd grade, I had a club that I made people get into it by answering trivia questions that I made up. And one of the trivia questions was who played Renfield in the 1931 Todd Browning Dracula. And nobody fucking knew that. Nobody knew it, but I'd be like, it's Dwight Fry, but don't worry, you're in anyway. You know, like such a dick. I was such a dick, but because I just wanted to
Little
prove that
Nathan
I
was such
knew.
a dick.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. Way more than I am now. But no, I really loved that movie, and it, I felt like I was part of it, and it was, I think, the first movie that made me really feel like a part of that world, and that it inspired me. Jeremy and I, my brother, we were writing comic books after that movie, The Fearless Vampire Killers, or The Great Vampire Killers. The Fearless Vampire Killers is a Roman Polanski film, but The Great Vampire Slayers, our comic book that we wrote, and like made movies after that, and all sorts of stuff. And it really kind of started with that movie really affecting us on that level. So it has to earn a place in my top 5.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, it's not a movie that should work as well as it does because it could have just turned out really
It still
like
holds
some
up too.
kids fair.
It's
Like
weird.
kids will love this, but I think that adults could find something to like about it. And I mean, you do like the whole group of kids, and it actually has some pretty violent moments in it because
Right.
the creature twists two people's heads and snaps them, if I remember.
Well, yeah, the Wolfman blows up, and it's got amazing actors in it. If you look at
Yeah.
all of the actors, I mean, they even got Tom Noonan to play the Frankenstein's monster in that.
And one of
Tom
the
Noonan was
scariest
pretty-
things I thought was when the kid is in his bedroom and he says, "There's a monster in my
And the
closet,"
mummy.
and the mummy's in there, and his dad doesn't think that
Ooh,
it's
big
in there.
scary
Right.
monster, and you see it in the
Yeah.
background, like.
And usually, I mean, I think that what it did is that it made those monsters a little bit scary again because they've
Yes.
kind of become
Yeah,
campy.
tropes. Yep,
Um,
exactly.
but Dracula is scary. The whole beginning with with Van Helsing and the brides,
Hmm.
you actually see the women get a stake through their hearts. So it has some pretty good scares in it,
It
and I
does.
think that kids would find it fun, but then also frightening too.
And that was another thing about it that that was really cool. That they talk about it in the special features. Um, I haven't seen the documentary yet, Wolfman's Got Nards, but I'm looking forward to it. But Fred Decker was talking about it. It was directed by Fred Decker, but it was written by Shane Black. Shane Black is the writer of Kiss Kiss
Yeah.
Bang Bang,
Lethal Weapon.
Lethal Weapon movies, just an amazing writer. And their combination is what makes that movie, I think, so strong. But also the marketing people, they didn't know how to market it. So it didn't do well when it came out because it's not a kids movie, right? It's about kids, but it's not really a kids movie. It shouldn't be viewed by too young of children because it's pretty adult. I mean, Dracula picks up Phoebe, the 5-year-old girl, and says, "Give me the amulet, you bitch," which my dad was like, "Absolutely not. This is not a good movie." But but yet he let me watch like an American Werewolf in London. So whatever. But you look at that movie and it isn't a kids movie, but it's not also for adults too much because it has this freshness that is more like a high school kids movie. So it's got this weird kind of thing and they didn't know how to market it, but yet the movie was wound up being a cult classic because of how unique it is and because it had such funny writing to it and all the actors are great. There's nobody in that movie that you're like, "Oh, wow, they're just really sucking it up." The monsters are awesome and the kids that are fighting them are awesome. They're all great. All
It's
of them.
it's kind of like one of those transitional movies where for a certain age of kids where maybe they're 10 years old, they're getting tired of more childish scary movies.
Yeah.
This is a good one that combines both and they feel like they're a little bit more adult watching it.
Yeah, it was 1987 when that came out, so I was 5 or 6 years old when that came out.
I must have seen part of it when it had just come out or maybe just come out to video, because I remember watching like I don't think it was the opening sequence, but it was when they're all like rising and coming back, and it was just horrifying. Like I ran out
When
of
they're
the
coming,
room.
the skeletons are coming up out of the ground and stuff at the beginning.
It's at the beginning.
When they open the
like
portal and there's all the
frightening.
skeletons coming up.
Yeah.
It's very
Mhm.
scary.
It was so frightening. I remember just like I didn't watch it. I I didn't watch it until I was much older
Yeah.
because that sequence, like, it just scared me so badly.
Yeah.
But again, I
terrifying.
must have been just like around that same age because I was born in '82 as well.
Yeah. All right, we're moving back on. Are we going back to Alex here? Is that right?
Yeah.
All right,
Mhm.
Alex, take her away.
Okay. So I have to say this one, then I have to explain a little bit because like it's how when I watch certain horror movies, etc. But my third one is Nightmare on Elm Street Dream Warriors. It's my favorite in the entire. New Nightmare comes close, but it's my favorite.
Is that the one that has Lawrence Fishburne in it?
Yeah, it's the one where Nancy comes back, where you've got John Saxon coming back.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is that the third or the fourth?
It's the third.
Third, okay. Yeah, fourth is.
We shouldn't. The second one's the one that there's a whole documentary on Shudder about after you did the second one. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't like it at first, but I like the second one now.
You should watch that documentary. Isn't it called Scream Queen?
Yeah, it's a great documentary. Yes, I highly recommend.
Great documentary. But yeah, that is it's not, it's the worst in all of them. Anyway, go ahead. Go ahead.
But um having characters from the first movie come back, but also like what I loved about it was the idea that because Freddy always seemed so unstoppable in my eyes, but the idea that like you could go into your dream and have some kind of fighting chance because you've got these powers inside of you that are released in your dreams. So I love just that aspect of it. Like the strength and then the gymnastics and the knives and being the, I mean, granted, being the Wizmaster didn't help much, but the idea of it, I enjoyed. Like something to give the kids a level playing field with Freddy almost, that they could almost put up a fight, you know? That kind of sparked the kind of joy for me in that aspect.
That probably goes somewhat close to Monster Squad in that if a kid were watching that, and that, again, it's a more goofy Nightmare on Elm Street one.
Yeah.
It's kind of gives the kids watching it. Yeah, I can have electricity. What was it? One kid's the wizard.
Yeah, the
Yep.
Wizmaster.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so you feel like you're a superhero type of
Mhm.
character, and you're battling the bad guy. So
Yeah.
I can
Yeah,
see
they
that.
really started to explore the magic of the dreams, like taking over your dreams and stuff in that one.
Another thing, back to Kolchak.
Back to Kolchak.
I forgot, because now that we're talking about Dream Warriors, the way that he exorcised this ghost is he had to dig up the body of the arsonist that had been buried and take it to the place where he had died and set it on fire.
Well, that's pretty perfect, isn't it? 'Cause
Isn't
that
it?
exactly what happens
Yeah.
in Dream Warriors?
Yep.
Yep.
Makes you think.
Damn it.
Makes you wonder. Someone get Wes Craven on the phone.